Greetings and welcome to the audience who just participated at the GRC Summit Indonesia 2021, which was held on 26 and 27 August 2021, which is last week. First of all, let me introduce our guest today, Mr. Michael Rasmussen, the GRC Analyst and Pundit of GRC 2020 Center, based in USA. Good day, Michael. Thank you for your coming. Whereas myself is the founder and principal of Center for Governance, Risk Management and Sustainability Studies Indonesia, or shortly CRMS Indonesia. We have a very rare opportunity to welcome Michael Rasmussen at this today's dialogue and discussion on GRC implementation, especially on its effectiveness. Hello, Michael. Thanks for the opportunity to have a discussion with you on the topic of GRC implementation. Allow me to table 4 questions which will be posed to you one by one accordingly through the discussions today. Allow me to start with the first question. What are the key success factors to have a successful GRC implementation? Is there any difference between those of practice in advanced market or country versus those of practice in emerging markets? Please, Michael.
Thank you, Antonius Aljoyo. The key success factors to having a successful GRC implementation are going to vary by industry, geography, size of organization. There's a lot of complexities to that. As their specific needs. Some industries have a lot more regulation than other industries. Some are more exposed to geopolitical risks and things like that. But when it comes down to a successful GRC implementation, some of the commonalities we can see across industries is making sure that you have a clearly defined strategy, that you understand what your current state is, what's happening for governance, risk, and compliance in the organization today, and what's your future state 2 or 3 years from now. And what's your roadmap to get there? The next key success factor is making sure you have the right team on board. Again, this is going to be something that's going to vary by industry, because in some industries like manufacturing or mining, you're going to have a lot of environmental health and safety risks, where in financial services, for example, you don't have those same risks. But some core areas that should be involved in any GRC strategy would be corporate compliance and ethics, internal audit, enterprise and operational risk management, IT security, and then add on others that make sense for your particular organization and industry as well. Another key success factor for a GRC implementation is selecting the right technology that can get you to what you're trying to achieve. That gets back to the first point I made, understanding your current state, where things are today, but what's your future state? What do you want them to look like 2 or 3 years from now? And making sure that you build on the right technology that can deliver on that future state as well. You need to get the right team on board, as I mentioned, the right technology, and you also need the right project plan that you're not taking on too much too quickly. So those are some ideas of some key success factors, and thank you, Antonius Aljoyo. I appreciate the question.
Thank you so much. Your thought, view, and shares, I believe, are very useful to the audience today. Now, allow me to pose the next questions. Is there any measure or measures to assess whether our GRC implementation has already been effectively done? Or alternatively, is there any GRC maturity index that can be used to compare the effectiveness of GRC implementation from one organization to another organization or one particular organization over certain time period? Please, Michael.
That's a great question, Antonius Aljoyo. And the reality is there's really no good benchmarking database on GRC across industries and organizations. Some big consulting firms have their own experience and things that they can deliver in that area, but there's no overall GRC maturity index. What I do find is that there is the OSEG GRC capability model, And to answer that first part of the question, what measures are there to assess whether a GRC has already been implemented effectively, I would take a close look at the GRC capability model, which has the 4 components, of learn, align, perform, and monitor. And in that context, there's many components to those 4 elements, but there's also a lot of defined practices, over 100 defined practices. And you can assess your organization against those practices and to determine how you're addressing the requirements established in the OSEG GRC capability model. That's one guidance that I could give out of the box there. But as far as an overall maturity index on the effectiveness of a GRC implementation from one organization over time, I have my own maturity model that I've worked with, from the ad hoc to the agile, a 5-step maturity model. But there's no good database of measuring organizations and comparing and contrasting them that I'm aware of at this point.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I believe audience who follow this discussion and dialogue will learn actually there are some measures actually to know exactly whether we implement our GRC effectively or not. Now, I think we need to discuss the question number 3, Michael. In this case, would you please share, is there any research or empirical evidence that shows a positive correlation between the effectiveness of GRC implementation and value of the firm, both for companies which are listed in the stock exchange market and for private non-listed ones? Please, Michael.
Antonius Aljoyo, that's a very challenging question. I'm not aware of a lot of good research specifically in this area. There are research on ethical companies and how ethical companies outperform, other companies, and in that context, we're seeing a lot of focus on ESG right now, the environmental social governance, and that strong performing ESG companies are supposedly outperforming other companies. But a lot of this is speculation at this point, and I don't think we have a lot of good empirical evidence in this area. At OSEG, we do every other year a GRC strategy survey, and we do find that those organizations that have implemented an effective GRC implementation feel that they have more positive outcomes in communication with the board of directors to understand risk on objectives. And so those that have an integrated GRC strategy tend to be much better at communicating and educating boards on risk, informing boards of directors and the organization of the effective risks on objectives. And that's the only clear thing that I can point to and think of is the OSEG GRC strategy surveys that we do every few years that has some of that in there. But in general, I haven't seen a lot of research in this particular space yet.
Thank you, Michael. For the audience, I think we had better continue with the 4th questions and then we come to the conclusion after all. Michael, is there any correlation between the effectiveness of GRC implementation and organization resilience, agility, and sustainability? Would you please share your perspective, experience, and views on this particular matter, both within the context of survival against the current COVID-19 pandemic impact and perhaps within the context of readiness to embrace the new normal post-pandemic?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Antonius Aljoyo. It's a very interesting, intriguing question, and I find that organizations that have had mature GRC practices in their organization have identified those risks and have addressed those, and in that context have built out scenarios and were better prepared to implement those scenarios in the context of the pandemic. But a lot of it gets to the scope of the GRC program itself. I wrote a blog article in December of 2019 before the pandemic became front page news. And it was called A Tale of Two Futures. Is our future a Blade Runner future or a Star Trek future? Not sure if you're a science fiction fan or not. But are we headed towards that dystopia of Blade Runner, or are we headed towards that more environmentally green-friendly, cooperative, social environment of Star Trek? and I mentioned in that blog article that the decisions organizations make today impact what future we're headed towards. And I specifically referenced that a lot of GRC and enterprise risk management programs are out of balance. That if you look at the World Economic Forum global risk reports, you would see that the most significant risks that the world faces are things like pandemic risks and environmental risks like climate change. And then I characterized in that blog article that you look at a lot of GRC and ERM strategies in organizations, and you'd think that their only risks were really predominantly IT security risks. And IT security risks are huge risks. I started my career in the 90s in IT security. I'm not saying that they're not big risks. That IT security is a big risk. But there's a lot of other risks organizations have to face as well. And I called out in that article that a lot of enterprise risk or GRC programs have to fundamentally change in scope to allow in a broader perspective of risk. And I found that those organizations that were already planning a broader perspective of risk, and that they weren't just captivated like an IT security risk, but seeing the range of different types of risk, including pandemic risks and climate change risks and things like that, and had laid out those scenarios, were definitely better prepared to address the pandemic as well as come out of it and recover from that. Recovering from it, I'm seeing a lot of organizations address a broader understanding of enterprise and operational risks to go well beyond just IT security risks, but still include them, and to focus on bringing together risk and resiliency programs to make things more integrated and effective in the organization. So where we had business continuity often buried in the depths of the organization in the past, we're seeing that business continuity is being brought into risk management where it should have been all along. And it's becoming a risk and resiliency program. In the United States, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC regulator, basically states that operational resiliency is an effective outcome of operational risk management. And so we're seeing a lot of change happening right now that is bringing a broader perspective on continuity and resiliency into risk management and therefore influencing GRC programs. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Antonius Aljoyo. It's been a pleasure to interact with you on these questions and at the conference. And thank you for all those that listened to this and have participated in the conference proceedings as well. It's a real honor to be able to work with each and every one of you.
Thank you, Michael. So, audience, we have finished actually question and answer as far as the dialogue today between Michael Rasmussen and myself, which covered the 4 topics here. We talked about the GRC implementation effectiveness. Is there any difference between advanced market versus emerging market? And what are the key success factors? Second, how to measure it, the maturity perhaps. And third, to learn how actually the correlation between GRC implementation and value of the firm. Either it is listed company or non-listed company. And lastly, we are also trying to discuss and elaborate the perspective, the correlation between GRC effectiveness and resilient agility and sustainability, particularly offered to against the survival of the pandemic COVID-19 today, and also embrace our new normal. In this context, we ask ourselves whether we are ready or not. So readiness are very important to embrace and make it the best value of our GRC implementation. Thank you so much, Michael. It's very useful for the audience today, and I do hope that we couldn't agree more that there should be more and more exchange view, discussion, and even practice sharings between and among the industry players, so we can improve and getting more and more effective GRC implementation in our working place. Thank you, Michael, and allow me to say thank you for the audience. And before I say goodbye, I would like to thank Michael to support your kind support to the successful GRC Summit 2021, which was last week. Very tremendously appreciated. Thank you so much. Bye bye, audience. Stay healthy.